Anything in any of this that you think we should be looking at is, well, maybe it was a 1, 2, 3 or not connected?
Well, the only way I think they're connected is that there's a tremendous disarray in the White House, both on policy and on communications. And, of course, the whole point of communications is to advance policy. And one of the continuing frustrations in the White House has been that when think of it, this was supposed to be Made in America week. This was supposed to be a week in which the president made a number of appearances. You know, he put on hats made in America, and he got in a fire truck made in America and all of that. Well, how many people even remember that? Because we've been talking about so many other things. And, you know, a perfect example is the president had what I think by all accounts was a very successful lunch with the senators on Wednesday. You can argue whether or not it's going to have any practical impact, but at least in terms of the image, a very successful lunch meeting with the vast majority of the 52 senators to talk about health care. And, you know, we've been promising this for 7 years. We got to stay in. We got to work on it. And he went straight from there to the Oval Office to meet with 3 New York Times reporters to spend 50 minutes talking to them supposedly on where the administration is 6 months in, and it ended up turning into all about the Russia investigation and bashing Jeff Sessions and setting red lines for Bob Mueller. And, you know, that's the continuing frustration in this White House, is that if they set a plan, we're going to talk about this week, it never stays there. And oftentimes they step on and divert their own message, which obviously has created tremendous frustration for people in the communications staff, like Sean Spicer.
Chris, it's Trish Regan here, and yes, it was clearly a really bad week for him, but now you get Anthony Scaramucci coming in, and as you point out, formerly at FBN, well known to many on Wall Street, but he's not someone who's had a tremendous amount of background in the communications strategy space. My question to you is, does that matter at this point, or are his relationships and his commitment to the president enough?
I think it matters a lot. I mean, I think there are 2 aspects to the job. One is having the trust and confidence of the president. That's enormously important, especially with this president, as we've seen just in the last 24, 36 hours with Jeff Sessions, who is very close to the president and seems to have lost a lot of the confidence of the president because of his recusal and the public flogging that happened in the New York Times as a result of that. Scaramucci, at least for now, is in solid with the president. As John was suggesting, he's a tough guy. He is fast on his feet. He's an able defender of the president. I hope he'll come on Fox News Sunday this week. But, you know, so in that sense, he's good. I think you raise a very legitimate question, though, which is what are his qualifications when it comes, one, to communication strategy, which is a lot more than just punching back on a cable TV show, and 2, what are his qualifications when it comes to communication strategy in advancing legislation in Washington, which is a very different thing. I don't know, you know, and frankly, I don't know the answer to this question, but how close are his ties to people on Capitol Hill, Paul Ryan, to Mitch McConnell, and in terms of working in concert with the Republican infrastructure, in the end, you know, what's the point of communication strategy? Yes, part of it is defending the president, but part of it is also advancing the agenda, and that's a real skill. We've seen good communications directors. We've seen bad communications directors, and now for the last, almost 2 months, we've had no communications director in the White House since Mike Dubke quit. And I think that there's been some drift. Whether if Scaramucci can get it under control, more power to him. But I think that's a legitimate question to ask.
All right, Sean Spicer, White House press secretary, has resigned. We're getting pictures now coming out of the White House. Look at this. This is reporters trying to get anything they can as this story breaks. Chris Wallace, you're still with us. This is a story even caught Reince Priebus and Steve Bannon by surprise. We're told that the president did not inform them that he was making this decision about Sean Spicer. So you're getting a look at reporters getting anything they can at the White House, trying to get reaction to this story. You know, Chris, this is catching a lot of people off guard, and I just have to ask you very simply, what message is this sending as we wrap up a week that you just mentioned was supposed to be made Made in America week for the president, it has taken a dramatic turn.
Well, I think what it shows is something we kind of knew already, but it's being reinforced again, which is this is Donald Trump's White House, and he's going to run it this way. I mean, you're talking about the chief of staff, Reince Priebus. You know, there's a part of being the chief of staff. You're in charge of the staff. And obviously the president always is, but in a day-to-day sense, you're in charge of the staff. So here is the president going over his chief of staff, basically saying, look, if it's a choice between you and Scaramucci, I'm going to go with Scaramucci. In addition, the relationship, and I know John Roberts talked about this, between Priebus and Spicer was really close. Priebus brought Spicer in with him. Spicer was Priebus's spokesman at the Republican National Committee. So they were, that was Priebus's man at the podium. And for the president to basically say, no, I want my guy as communications director, even if that means Priebus, or rather Spicer, is going to leave, is a real statement. And it certainly weakens Priebus's position inside the White House. I will say Spicer, it seems to me from his point of view, maybe it may be merciful for him to leave this White House. I mean, he really has suffered a lot of indignities. It's been no secret that the president has watched Spicer, has been unhappy with Spicer in his briefings. As time went on, you saw Spicer. First of all, the briefings went off camera. Then Spicer did fewer and fewer of the off-camera briefings, audio only. And Sarah Huckabee Sanders did more and more, plus the whole Melissa McCarthy spoofs on SNL. They say sometimes people don't get paid enough. I wonder if Spicer might feel like he stopped hitting his head against a wall when he leaves the White House here.
Steve has a question.
Hi, Chris. It's Steve Hilton here. It seems to me that this story is just another manifestation of a bigger thing, which is that President Trump was elected last year as a populist, very different to the traditional Republicans with their agenda. And it feels to me as if he's never really had around him a group of people really united and not just supportive of him personally, but who really understand and buy into that populist agenda. And I just wonder whether this might be the sign of him really trying to implement that, and that you might see more moves like this. I'm thinking in particular of people like Corey Lewandowski, who I think is in that category of people who really understand why President Trump was elected and support that agenda. Do you think you might see more people like that coming back in to the White House around the president, so he at least has a united, loyal team around him?
Well, that may happen. You've got to remember, this is the president's team. These are the people he appointed, and there was no surprise. People knew about the various power centers, and John is right. There is a Game of Thrones quality to this White House. I mean, you do have various power centers that are colliding with each other, whether it's Steve Bannon and not so much him anymore, Reince Priebus, Jared Kushner, the kind of harder nationalist group, like people like Peter Navarro in trade, or Stephen Miller in speeches, Gary Cohn and Mnuchin, who are more globalists when it comes to economic policy. So to a certain degree, this has been the team that the president has wanted.